Coming up on today's show, I'm going to break down and react to an ESPN article where they had a bunch of their beat reporters play GM for their respective teams, and the Broncos ended up signing Gardner Minshew, and Russell Wilson ended up going to Atlanta, and Denver drafted a quarterback. So we're going to break all this down on today's show, but really quickly, it is January 31st, the last day of the month, and the last chance to beat our January 2023 sub record of 401 subscribers. So help us get over that hump right there and click the sub button down below if you have not already. Now let's get into ESPN's prediction / playing GM, where they have Gardner Minshew going to the Denver Broncos. So initial reaction right off the bat is, I'm not opposed to Gardner Minshew quarterbacking for the Denver Broncos. Is that a long-term fix? No, absolutely not. But I think Gardner Minshew is a good quarterback. I do wonder sometimes when teams catch lightning in a bottle with these backup QBs that rise up, it feels like so much of their success is rooted with that team alone. And when you try and replicate it elsewhere, it just doesn't carry all that well. It doesn't travel, right? Nick Foles is a prime example. It's only worked in Philly. Didn't work in Jacksonville. Didn't work in Chicago. And I wonder if Gardner Minshew is one of those guys. But Jeff Legwold, who covers the Broncos for ESPN, this is the contract he was willing to give out to Gardner Minshew. 2 years, $14 million, fully guaranteed. The deal would add in $500,000 if Denver wins the AFC West and $250,000 if it makes the playoffs, plus $500,000 for playing 70% of the offensive snaps and another 500% for 80%. Time for me to sound like a broken record, but how much better quarterback play are you going to get from Gardner Minshew that makes it worthwhile to eat $85 million in dead cap money and add another quarterback contract? I understand that you can do better than Russell Wilson, and I'm not even 100% certain that Gardner Minshew would even be that much of an upgrade from Russell Wilson. But what I am certain of is that it would not be a big enough upgrade to warrant an $85 million dead cap hit and then tack on whatever you're paying the next quarterback, right? You could almost look at it as a $100 million QB because there's $85 million devoted to a quarterback not even on the roster and $15 million devoted to the next QB. That is an absurd amount of money to spend when I don't even know if you're getting a better quarterback out of it. Now, Denver made their bed when they benched Russell Wilson for the last 2 weeks of the season. Sean Payton can try and feed me a line of bullshit that it was to provide a spark on offense. No, it wasn't. You were ready to move on from Russell Wilson. You didn't really like Russell Wilson from day one when you told him to stop kissing babies. You didn't really get too fond of the previous regime when you badmouthed Nathaniel Hackett to the media. Didn't do yourself many favors with the current Broncos staff that was retained from 2022 to 2023. But no, I am not going to subscribe to the idea of Russell Wilson could return in 2024. When you benched him and you tossed that cancer into the locker room, you are not bringing it back the next season. Now, let's talk about Gardner Minshew for a moment in more detail, because I thought he played outstanding for the Indianapolis Colts this year. I mean, given the role of filling in for Anthony Richardson a few games into the season, he had Indianapolis more or less playing in a playoff game in Week 18 against the Houston Texans. And if I told Colts fans that the day Anthony Richardson was ruled out for the rest of the season, they would not have believed me. And Gardner Minshew in his career, actually, I bet blind QB resume, you didn't think he'd have these types of numbers. 59 touchdowns to 24 interceptions. Minshew has played much better than maybe people give him credit for, but for me, it really comes down to dollars and cents. And I'm just not on board with giving Gardner Minshew $14 million guaranteed. I mean, this is what ESPN's contract idea is. When you've already devoted so much to Russell Wilson. And hey, if you want to move on from Russell Wilson, I can understand why. But why bring in a lame duck quarterback? And that's what Gardner Minshew would be, a lame duck quarterback, just to get the same type of quarterback production out of him that you could have gotten out of Russell Wilson. So would you give out this contract? 2 years, $14 million, fully guaranteed. That's $7 million a season. Guaranteeing all of it means you're not going to just get out of Gardner Minshew's contract after 1 year. You can front load it. You can back load it. It doesn't matter. It's a 2-year contract. You're devoting another $14 million to the quarterback room, which is already an enormously huge bill after the $85 million dead cap you incur when you move on from Russell Wilson. I'll also add this. You just gave Jarrett Stidham $10 million. At some point, you got to sleep in the bed that you made. I understand that Russell Wilson was a mistake. I got it wrong. I thought it would go much better than it did. But you signed Jarrett Stidham last year to a similar contract. And after 2 games, we're going to burn the bridge on Jarrett Stidham? What was the point of giving Jarrett Stidham $10 million, which is a good amount of change for a backup quarterback, if after just 2 games played in week 17 and 18, you decide, nope, we're going to add another $14 million to the quarterback room? I'm tired of this. Pick a quarterback. Like, Russell Wilson didn't work out. Jarrett Stidham, 2 games in. You're going to move on already? At some point, you got to roll with the quarterback you paid. Because, yes, Walmart money is a lot of fun and it affords you a lot of opportunities, but there is a salary cap in the NFL. And if every single year you just throw money at quarterbacks to bench them and cut them and find a new quarterback the next offseason, you're going to become a complete joke of a franchise. And Denver's already creeping into that territory for how many quarterbacks they have had since Peyton Manning retired. And every year that passes with the Broncos missing the playoffs yet again, despite being an incredibly accomplished franchise for all their success from the 90s into the 2000s. But that is fading away. And adding Gardner Minshew to the mix, it just feels like it's one more quarterback that's going to spend 1 year in Denver, just like Trevor Siemian, Joe Flacco, Case Keenum. And if you're looking for a mediocre quarterback play, why are you burning $85 million on fire when Russell Wilson could provide you that? Before we get on to the rest of today's show and talk about where Russell Wilson ends up and who the Broncos draft in this ESPN article, I do want to shout out our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. If you are looking to stay extra locked in on the Super Bowl, get started with Prize Picks today, because we all know it can be tough to maybe persuade our significant other to watch the entire game. But with Prize Picks, it's super simple and user-friendly, and it's a great way to stay locked in for a game the Denver Broncos are not playing in. So, here are my selections on Prize Picks. I am unfortunately taking Darth Vader, Patrick Mahomes, more than half a passing yard. I'm going to go on a limb here and say I think Mahomes might throw for 1 or 2 yards. I also going to take the more on Brock Purdy. His rushing yards at 11.5. We saw him scrambling all over the field against the Lions. I also like the more for Isaiah Pacheco at half a touchdown. And then finally, Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback in San Francisco. I like the more at half a fantasy point. Just need a 10-yard run, a 10-yard reception. Bingo. So if you like my selections, feel free to ride with me. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match. If you have a wife, a fiance, a girlfriend, or even a boyfriend who's not very interested in football, well, download Prize Picks today, make those selections, and then give them those selections so they have something to meaningfully watch on Super Bowl Sunday. And if it hits, you can treat each other to a nice steak dinner. So go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. The second prediction/GM action that the ESPN article had was Russell Wilson going to the Atlanta Falcons. So I figured we might as well be, jealous exes a little bit and keep tabs on Russell Wilson throughout the offseason, see where he may end up, because I fully expect the Denver Broncos to move on from Russell Wilson. And this is what ESPN cooked up. A 3-year contract for Atlanta, $36 million. That's an average of $12 million a season, and they guaranteed $20 million. I'm being dead honest when I say this. I'm not positive that the ESPN beat reporter for the Falcons, Michael Rothstein, knows that the way Russell Wilson's contract is set up is that whatever money he gets from another team, that is subtracted from what the Denver Broncos owe him. And so if I were Russell Wilson and I were released by my team, I would be a little petty and just take the vet minimum, because you're going to get the same amount of money. It's just who's paying the bill, the Broncos or the Falcons. And wouldn't you want to do your next team a solid and take the vet minimum so they can spend more of their money on other players in free agency? Because at the end of the day, you're still getting the same amount of money deposited to your bank account. Is it wired in from Denver or Atlanta? I bet he would pick Denver. Now, Russell Wilson this past season, I do believe played well enough to continue to be a starting quarterback in this league. We saw some really bad quarterback play in 2023. Like, go look what the New York Jets trotted out when Aaron Rodgers went down, right? The Cleveland Browns started 5 quarterbacks this season. Like, there were a lot of teams looking for consistent QB play. Russell Wilson completed 66% of his passes for 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Are those numbers that you think could win you a Super Bowl? Probably not. Are those numbers that are better than what other players performed? Absolutely. Now, I do want to toss this question your direction. If you had to pick a quarterback for 2024, who would you rather have start week 1? Russell Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, or Gardner Minshew? I was pretty honest, I would say, with my Russell Wilson assessment throughout the season, which was, hey, this 5-game winning streak is a lot of fun, but it is being manufactured primarily by the takeaways on defense. And I fear that when those takeaways go away, because those are not things you can consistently count on week in and week out, this offense might start to sink a little bit. And that's exactly what happened against the Texans, against the Lions, against the Patriots. But I would still think Russell Wilson gives you the best chance of winning over Stidham and Gardner Minshew. Now, I don't think Russ and Sean Payton are a good fit, but if I'm picking one quarterback, I think I'd probably go with Russell Wilson between those 3 options. To wrap up the show, I do want to look at ESPN's mystery quarterback selection for the Broncos in the draft, because in this GM playing world, Denver did not go QB in round 1. The Broncos don't have a round 2 pick, but they do have the 76 overall pick in round number 3. And with it, they select, drumroll please, Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane. 6'3", 220 pounds. He was essentially a 4-year starter at Tulane, came in as a true freshman, started a vast majority of the games. I think he started 9 out of 10 games, 10 out of 11 games. So if we're making a compliment sandwich for Michael Pratt, pro, started 43 games by my count at Tulane. There's a lot of people wondering how the 49ers are having so much success with Brock Purdy, and a lot of people are pointing to all the experience he gained in college. When he got to the pros, he wasn't learning how to play football at a high level. He had done that for 4 years or so. Con, he doesn't have great arm strength. If you were hoping this is a guy that might have an absolute cannon of an arm and just needs to tweak maybe the accuracy or the ability to read defenses, that's not really his forte. But similar to Brock Purdy, he didn't come out of Ames, Iowa with a cannon of an arm. No, he just has a really good feel and tempo for the game, and he makes the right throws at the right times. And that's what Michael Pratt did for 4 years down in New Orleans. When you look at his stats, they might not jump off the screen, but I don't think it's fair to evaluate college quarterbacks based on how many yards or touchdowns they threw. Every quarterback was working in a different league, a different conference, against different defenses with different weapons. They were basically playing their own brand of football. That's not really the best way to evaluate how successful a QB is going to be in the pro ranks. So I have full send mode on drafting a quarterback in round 3. If Denver does not go QB in round 1, take one in round 3, take one in round 4. Quarterback is just such a difficult position to nail down. It's worth throwing a dart at the board. If it misses, you didn't burn one of your first or second round picks on it, okay? If it hits, you can erase what was a disaster move of the Russell Wilson trading contract. Look at the 49ers right now. Not to really make them the standard, but the 49ers, if they didn't get Brock Purdy, they'd be in hell right now, right? They'd be right where Denver is. Great roster in a lot of other places, just don't have a quarterback. It's worth throwing a dart at the board in round 3 and round 4. If it doesn't work out, do me a favor. Go look at some previous Broncos drafts. Look at the 3rd and 4th round picks. Tell me how many of them were impact players. You have your good ones, don't get me wrong. You get a Baron Browning every here and there. But you also have some bad ones. So I don't have an issue with taking a shot at Michael Pratt in round 3 or round 4 or wherever he ends up going. I can get behind that. But which QB do you want to draft? Don't say I guess you could say Caleb Williams, but keep in mind that involves a major trade up. So let me know what quarterback you would like to see the Broncos draft. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. I really appreciate those of you taking time out of your day to watch and hang out with us here at the Broncos Breakdown. We'll let you guys get on out of here, and we will catch up tomorrow.